At 4:30 a.m., through the front door camera, I could see every detail on the face of the man who betrayed me. Exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, yet still gleaming with the smug satisfaction of someone who had just left his mistress's arms. He tried to twist the lock, yanked it hard, but the door wouldn't budge. When it finally opened with the spare key, his body froze. There were no washed baby bottles, no containers of formula on the dining table as usual. As he stepped further inside, a flicker of panic crossed his face upon seeing the diapers gone. The newborn clothes vanished. It wasn't until he looked at the iPad on the living room table that his expression shifted from confusion to real terror. He dropped into the chair, hands trembling as he frantically dialed his phone. I'm Everly, 36 years old, a designer for an interior design firm in Detroit, living with my husband, Lucas, head of sales at Eagle Premier Insurance, in a two-bedroom house in Troy. From the outside, we looked like the ideal couple: a stable home, a new Lexus, good jobs, and neighbors who always said we were lucky, happy. But sometimes the brightest surfaces hide the deepest cracks. That night, 5 days after I gave birth to our daughter Mila, around 11 o'clock, I was sitting in the rocking chair in our bedroom, the soft yellow light casting a warm glow over the two of us. Mila nursed slowly before falling asleep, and the whole Troy neighborhood outside had gone silent, tucked away in its winter. Lucas texted me, "I'm driving to Chicago, signing a big client tomorrow morning. Get some rest, okay?" I couldn't sleep, not just because I was worried about his safety driving nearly 5 hours at night, but because of something else, something strange pressing into my chest that I couldn't yet define. I placed Mila in her crib and glanced over at the Louis Vuitton bag Lucas had brought to the hospital on my second day postpartum. I didn't know why, but something compelled me to open it. Right then, I unzipped it. In the first compartment, I found a gray cashmere scarf, the exact shade I loved. I brought it to my face. The scent of Shalimar hit me instantly. I froze. I don't wear that perfume, but it was the same scent I had smelled many times on Lucas's shirts while doing laundry. Every time I asked, he'd say, "Probably a female client stood close," or "You're just sensitive," or "It was from entertaining guests." I used to believe him, but for some reason, that night, the scent felt more like a confession than an excuse. I opened the second, smaller compartment. A thick envelope from the Dearborn Inn fell onto the wooden floor. Written on the front in blue ink, "Thank you, Lucas and Serenity." My hands went cold. I opened it. A $350 suite bill dated the exact day I was in the hospital waiting to give birth to Mila. Lucas had told me he had to entertain clients in Detroit that day. Inside the bill was a map, directions to a small cabin overlooking Lake St. Clair. The location was clearly circled in red. I flipped the map over, my heart sank. Taped to the back was a Polaroid. Lucas holding a blonde woman around the waist in front of a fireplace, both of them smiling brightly. And she, Serenity, Lucas's former coworker, was wearing the exact gray sweater that had disappeared from my closet. Scrawled across the edge of the photo, "Our first weekend in our cabin. Forever yours, S." In that moment, it felt like someone had sucked every drop of air out of the room. The episiotomy scar still ached, but that pain was nothing compared to the invisible grip crushing my chest. All the old pieces came rushing back. The nights Lucas came home late, smelling like unfamiliar perfume. The 10 p.m. client calls. The time he slipped and started to say, "Slow," then changed it to "someone from the team." The phone he always placed face down. The times I brought up starting a college fund for Mila, and he'd just say, "You just rest, let me take care of everything." I remembered Aunt Maya, my aunt who raised me since I was little, a retired federal judge, once saying, "Never let anyone have full control of your finances." But I had handed everything over to him, thinking Lucas, the man who worked in insurance, would know how to protect our family, the way he protected the contracts he signed. Every day I wanted to trust him. I had trusted him. Until now, when that trust shattered, loud and clear like glass hitting the floor. And suddenly, his business trip to Chicago text felt like a hairline crack that had been there all along I needed to know. I opened my phone, launched the Find My feature, something Lucas himself had asked me to install because he often misplaced his phone at work, left it in the car, or forgot it at the gym. It took 2 seconds for the map to load, but those 2 seconds stretched into a lifetime. The blue dot showing his phone's location wasn't on the road to Chicago, wasn't on I-94, wasn't anywhere remotely related to business. It was right at the lakefront cabin on Lake St. Clair. I stared at the screen, and his betrayal repeated itself over and over like a well-practiced habit. I turned to look at Mila sleeping in the crib. Her tiny face, peaceful, innocent. I leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I won't let you grow up in betrayal." I stood up and began gathering everything I needed: a few baby outfits, diapers, bottles, her temporary birth certificate, and a few of my personal documents. Then I opened the iPad Pro on the desk, logged into our joint bank account. I scrolled through the transactions, each line a blade: a two-person resort bill in Hawaii, a presidential suite in a Manhattan hotel. Then one entry stood out: $250,000, Lake St. Clair property, final payment, SP. I zoomed in on the transaction, left the screen fully lit, and placed the device facing the door. An unspoken message. I turned off all the lights in the house, double-locked the door, slid the key under the welcome mat. I strapped Mila to my chest, opened the door, and stepped into a waiting taxi under the dim yellow streetlight. When the driver asked where to, I answered, "Lansing, Michigan." It was the longest, most painful journey of my life. The journey of leaving a house and leaving the weakest version of myself behind. When the taxi stopped in front of Aunt Maya's red brick house in Lansing, the early morning cold brushed against my face as I carried Mila out of the car. I hadn't even pressed the doorbell when the front door swung open, as if she had known I was coming. Aunt Maya looked me over, my tear-smeared mascara, the coat still carrying the scent of milk and hospital, Mila asleep in the wrap. And she asked only one question, calm and chilling. "What did he do?" I couldn't speak. My throat clenched. She led me inside, closed the door, switched on the kitchen light, and placed her hand on my back the same way she used to when I was a child. Once Mila was laid down in the spare bassinet in the living room, I began to speak. Without pausing, without measuring my words, without trying to make sense of it. I told her everything: the Shalimar-scented scarf, the bill from the Dearborn Inn, the cabin map, the Polaroid, the late-night text about Chicago, the $250,000 transfer in our shared account. When my voice trembled, she simply placed her hand over mine, anchoring me forward. Aunt Maya didn't interrupt, didn't ask for more, didn't act surprised. She didn't call Lucas by name, only he, as if words had lost their power to express her disappointment. When I showed her the Polaroid, she tilted it under the yellow light, looked at it for 3 seconds, and placed it on the old table. "That girl wanted you to find this," she said, pointing at the taped corner. "A fool hides evidence. A clever one leaves it exactly where it needs to be." Her eyes were cold and sharp, the same look she wore on the bench. "Good. Now we'll use what he gave us to take both of them down." She stood up, pulled over a chair, opened her worn black notebook, and dialed a number. Financial crimes aren't like cheating. They leave a trail. They leave a money path. Then she called her friend Morales, an investigator at the Federal Financial Bureau. I listened as she spoke in short, clear bursts, as if reading charges aloud. "Morales, I need you to check my niece's husband's finances. There's a cabin in the Mistress's name, a suspicious $250,000 transfer, and I suspect something much bigger behind these hotel bills." Morales needed less than a minute to respond. His voice came through the speaker, strong and immediate. "Send me everything you have." I opened my iPhone, went into iCloud Drive, selected the entire folder: bank statements, cabin photos, hotel invoices, the map, the Polaroid. All of it had synced overnight. I hit share, and gave Morales full access to the account. When I placed my phone on the table, Aunt Maya looked at me for a long time and said, with a voice as steady as metal, "From now on, you're not fighting alone." I must have drifted off at some point, because the next thing I heard was a furious banging on the door, like someone trying to break it down. I jolted awake and clutched Mila. Aunt Maya glanced at the clock. Exactly 6 a.m. She looked at me, then the door, and sighed. "It's him." The pounding intensified, followed by Lucas's voice shouting through the door, "Everly, open up! I know you're in there. Please open the door." I stood behind the curtain, my heart hammering against the healing scar. Lucas was outside, disheveled, pale, coat wrinkled, looking like a desperate husband searching for his postpartum wife. If I didn't know what I knew, I might have believed him. He rang the bell repeatedly, pounded the wood like he wanted the entire neighborhood to hear. "Everly, where did you take Mila? You just gave birth. You're not thinking straight. Please open the door. Don't make this worse." Half plea, half blame. The specialty of a man who's mastered gaslighting. Aunt Maya moved calmly to the door, opened it just a sliver, enough to keep him out. "What do you want?" she asked, voice flat and emotionless. Lucas immediately softened, leaning forward like a child begging to come inside. "Aunt Maya, I just want to see my wife. She just gave birth. She's hormonal. She's imagining things I'm worried about her, about Mila. Please don't let her twist things and run off with my daughter like this." I saw it clearly. The script he was trying to spin. Me, the unstable wife. Him, the caring husband left in the dark, polished. Practiced. Aunt Maya didn't blink. She raised her hand and held out two things: the Polaroid photo and the hotel bill from the Dearborn Inn, dated the day I gave birth. The morning light lit up the image, Lucas and Serenity smiling by the fireplace. "You call this imagination?" she asked, softly enough to freeze the air. Lucas stopped cold. His face drained. He stepped back, as if the ground beneath him cracked open. "You're misunderstanding," he stammered. "Everly's confused. Serenity is just—" "Shut your mouth!" Aunt Maya cut in, her voice sharp as a judge's gavel. "One more word blaming her, and I'll call the police." Silence dropped over the porch. Lucas drew in a breath, glanced at the window. "If Everly's in there," he said, voice lower now, "tell her this isn't over. I will get Mila back." He turned, stormed to the car, and slammed the door like a last attempt at control. I watched from the curtain as the car sped off, leaving behind the harsh smell of gasoline in the quiet Lansing dawn. Aunt Maya locked the door, bolted it, turned to me, and said just two words. A threat. But her voice didn't waver, and because of that, I knew I didn't have to either. But that thought had barely settled when Aunt Maya's phone vibrated with a short buzz. She leaned in to check it, eyes close to the screen, then looked up at me. "Morales, he's heading into the office and will call back in a few hours." She put the phone down and poured me a cup of hot tea. "Brace yourself. What we've found is just the tip of the iceberg." The afternoon passed in a tense, sticky fog. Mila slept soundly in the temporary crib, her breath soft and steady like a delicate string. I paced the living room, clutching my teacup with trembling hands. I didn't know what lay ahead, only that everything about the cabin, the Polaroid, the money trails, it was more than just infidelity. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Aunt Maya's phone rang. She put it on speaker as soon as Morales spoke his first sentence. "Maya, I've just finished reviewing the financial trail and banking records." His voice held no hesitation. Lucas set up a shell company with a name almost identical to Eagle Premier, so similar that regular clients wouldn't know the difference. He used it to collect insurance payments from over 100 clients, but none of those accounts were ever registered with the actual firm. I stood frozen. Morales continued, voice steady like reading an indictment. All the money was funneled through a dummy account, then dispersed to various outlets: the Lake St. Clair cabin, a Hawaii resort, and a luxury apartment at Riverfront Towers under the name Serenity Parker. My chest clenched. I had suspected cheating, but I never imagined Lucas was moving around money people had saved for years. Money they trusted him with. just to fund a double life outside our marriage. Aunt Maya gripped the phone tightly, her voice low. This is federal Morales, not emotional drama. Exactly, he said. And multiple transfers were made directly to someone marked SP. I checked. That's Serenity Parker. She's not just a mistress, she's the recipient. I looked down at Mila, her tiny hand curled as if clutching an invisible thread. My heart burned, half in betrayal, half in rage at the scale of this lie. Aunt Maya glanced at me, then spoke back into the phone. Morales, can you run a full background check on Serenity? We need everything. Residence, employment, contacts, credit history. I need to know if she's a victim or an accomplice. I've started the report, he replied. But you should call Sarah. For this kind of file, Sarah works faster than anyone. At the sound of that name, Aunt Maya hung up, opened her contacts, and dialed without hesitation. As the ringtone echoed, she looked at me. Get ready. What's coming might hurt more. But it's the truth. Sarah, the founder of a private detective agency in Ann Arbor and Aunt Maya's best friend for over 30 years, answered on the second ring. Aunt Maya didn't mince words. Sarah, I need a full file on a girl named Serenity Parker, ASAP. She's tied to a dirty money case involving my niece's husband. I heard keys clacking on the other end instantly, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't just the journey of a betrayed wife anymore. It had become an investigation, a dissection of every lie Lucas had hidden behind, now laid bare for the scalpel. The next 2 days passed in a thick fog. I stayed in Lansing, ignored Lucas's messages, never opened Facebook or email. I stayed close to Mila, sat beside Aunt Maya, waiting for news from Morales and Sarah. On the second morning, just as I was rocking Mila to sleep, Aunt Maya's phone lit up. Sarah had sent a brief message. I've got something, you both need to see it. Aunt Maya opened her laptop, connected to Sarah's private server. A video window popped up. Footage from a security camera at an Italian restaurant in downtown Detroit, dated 8 weeks before I gave birth to Mila. The ambiance was warm, golden light, soft music. Then I saw them. Lucas and Serenity sitting close together at a back corner table, intentionally choosing the most hidden spot Serenity wore. A cream square-neck dress, her blonde hair tied low, holding a white envelope. She scooted closer, her face feigning timid sincerity. In the video, she opened the envelope and pulled out an ultrasound image. Even from a distance, I knew it was a pregnancy scan. She handed it to him with both hands, like offering the most sacred gift. Lucas looked at the paper, and his reaction made my stomach knot. He laughed, covered his face, collapsed onto the table in joy. He pulled Serenity close, placed a hand on her belly, and repeatedly said things like, "Really? Really? Oh my God," while Serenity pretended to cry, nodding as if she'd waited forever for this moment. The way he looked, the way he smiled, the excitement in his eyes. I'd never seen that Lucas, not even when I was pregnant with Mila Sarah, sent 2 more files. One was a PDF of medical records. From the hospital, Serenity claimed she was getting prenatal care. The file was completely blank. Serenity Parker had never had a pregnancy visit. At the end, Sarah had highlighted a line in red. No pregnancy-related visits recorded. Aunt Maya nodded. Just as I thought. The third file was a screenshot of a Reddit post from the group, Fake Ultrasounds, Quick Delivery. A user named Serenity Parker, 93, had posted, Need 5-week ultrasound, must look real, urgent. Below it, a chat with a seller offering fake scans. $150. File in an hour. The transaction was dated the same day as the restaurant video. My chest burned. This wasn't just cheating. This was a play, woven with threads of lies. The cabin, the cashmere scarf, the hotel bill, and now, a fake child. Sarah sent one final message. She used the fake pregnancy to keep Lucas, and he fell deep. Aunt Maya leaned back, arms crossed, her eyes sharp as blades. Serenity's not stupid, but she's used to cheap tricks on weak men. She knew Lucas craved a perfect family fantasy, so she gave him a fake baby. He gave her real money. I looked at Mila, sleeping in her crib, her tiny belly rising and falling with each innocent breath. I placed my hand on the crib, trembling. He believed in a fake pregnancy, I said, my voice cracking, while ignoring the real one that carried Mila. Aunt Maya placed a firm but gentle hand on my shoulder. You're not weak. You're facing something far bigger than you thought. But we've come this far. There's no turning back. Her phone buzzed again. Morales. Ready when you are for the next step. I took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the fake ultrasound glowing on the screen. And I knew. The next step would lead us to the place Lucas feared most. The raw truth about the money, the cabin, and the woman who faked a child that never existed. Aunt Maya stood up, slammed the laptop shut, her voice solid as stone. Let's go. Bring the photos, the statements, the cabin map. That girl needs to know there's no escape route left. I strapped Mila into the carrier, wrapped her in a small blanket. Lansing's wind was turning sharp. Aunt Maya packed all the evidence into a brown file folder. The Polaroid photo, the Dearborn Inn invoice, the Lake St. Clair cabin map, the $250,000 transfer statement, and the printed still from the restaurant showing Serenity handing Lucas the fake ultrasound. We drove her car. I said nothing the entire 90-minute trip to Detroit. Riverfront towers appeared like a giant glass wall pressed against the river. Beautiful in a cold, unreachable way, the kind of beauty men like Lucas easily fall for. I stood at Serenity's door, apartment 21B. Mila pressed to my chest. Aunt Maya rang the bell. The click of heels approached, followed by a soft turn of the lock. Serenity opened the door, and her face cycled through 3 expressions in a second. Surprise, fear, then a smug, triumphant mask snapping into place. Everly? She sneered. You saw the hotel bill and the photo, didn't you? Lucas loves me. Coming here to beg won't work. I didn't speak, just stared straight into her eyes. She folded her arms, leaning against the doorframe like a guard. But Aunt Maya stepped forward and shoved the door open so hard Serenity stumbled back. Her voice was low but clear. You want to play love games? Fine. But laundering federal insurance money? That's no game. She placed the evidence folder on the glass coffee table, one by one. She laid down the proof like final cards. The Polaroid labeled, Forever Yours. Yay. The invoice dated the day I gave birth. The cabin map with a red circle. And finally, the $250,000 transfer statement under Serenity Parker's name. Serenity swallowed hard, lips pale, hands clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. We know about the ultrasound, Aunt Maya said before she could respond. And we know it was bought on Reddit for $150. Congratulations, you nearly pulled it off on a very stupid man. Serenity trembled. For the first time, I saw her unmasked. Not the confident woman who invaded a marriage, not the sharp-eyed mistress from the Polaroid. Just a panicked young woman realizing she'd gone too far. He said he'd leave her. He said. She sobbed. Aunt Maya crossed her arms. We didn't come to hear your sob story. We came to hear what Lucas did. Finally, Serenity slumped into a chair, head bowed, tears running, her voice trembled like a confession. The papers. They're at the cabin, in the safe near the kitchen. Lake St. Clair. He kept all the real documents there. I faked the pregnancy. He believed me. He dumped money like crazy. I didn't know it was client money. I thought he was just some rich guy hiding assets. I don't want to go to jail. I'll cooperate. Silence thickened the room. Aunt Maya looked at me, then back at Serenity, as if weighing just how stupid and dangerous the girl was. Finally, she nodded, sharp and cold. Good, you'll cooperate. And if you lie once, the cops will be here before you can breathe. I held Mila tighter, even with a confession. I felt like I was standing in a room full of broken glass. Not just my own, but pieces of everyone Lucas had deceived. And I knew. The next step would take us into that forest cabin, where the truth was waiting, full and impossible to hide. That afternoon, Aunt Maya called Morales to report Serenity's statement. Within half an hour, Morales replied, "I've secured the warrant. Meet me at Lake Street Clare at 5 p.m." The sun was sinking as we got in the car. I sat in the back seat holding Mila, while Aunt Maya sat up front, the last rays of daylight brushing her cheekbones, making her look exactly like those unshakable judges in old documentaries. Calm, decisive, unyielding. As the car turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, I felt like I was stepping into the final scene of a film I'd been forced to re-watch from the beginning. Lake St. Clair shimmered in hues of orange and violet under the setting sun, tall pine trees casting long shadows over the water. In the distance, Lucas's wooden cabin emerged, small, cozy, peaceful, and also the place that held all the lies that had burned through my life. In front of the cabin, 3 federal police vehicles were already parked. Morales stood by a black SUV, holding a stack of papers. When he saw us, he nodded. "Let's go in." The cabin door creaked open inside. The scent of pine wood lingered. Golden light from string bulbs filled the space, and everything was suspiciously neat, as if Lucas had tried to create a clean world to make up for the filth in his real one. Morales signaled to an agent. "Safe by the kitchen." Serenity had told the truth. An agent knelt down, pulled away the wood panel beneath the kitchen cabinet, and revealed a gray safe, lightly dusted. Clear sign Lucas had used it recently. "What's the code?" Morales asked. Aunt Maya answered quietly, "Their wedding date." The agent turned the dials one by one. The safe popped open, and all the truth spilled out like a broken dam. First was the cabin purchase contract, filed under Serenity Parker's name, but all the installment payments traced back to the shell company Lucas had set up. Next came a thick, worn black notebook. Aunt Maya flipped through it with her thumb. Inside were lists of kickbacks, funds siphoned from clients who had trusted Lucas for years, and finally, something I never imagined Lucas would be reckless enough to keep, a small silver USB tucked neatly inside an envelope. Morales plugged it into his laptop. Within seconds, Excel spreadsheets appeared. Victim lists from whom insurance funds had been siphoned, dates, times, and amounts of unauthorized transactions, recipient accounts, fake investment projects, slow trickles of money wired to Serenity's account, and numerous transfers tied to the cabin, like layers of skin being peeled away. I stood there, unable to breathe for a few seconds. Every number on that screen wasn't just money. It was families, elderly people, patients. People who once trusted my husband Morales looked at me, then at Aunt Maya. This is enough to jail Lucas for a decade, maybe more. I held Mila close, listening to her soft, steady, innocent breathing, completely at odds with the heavy air inside the cabin. The last sliver of sunlight faded behind the wooden blinds, and it felt like the darkness was swallowing the version of Lucas I once loved, revealing the man who hadn't just betrayed a marriage, but every single person who placed their trust in him. And I understood. This wasn't just evidence. This was the end I needed. And the beginning of the rest of the fight. Just as I turned to Aunt Maya, ready to leave the cabin, the roar of an engine shattered the twilight stillness among the pine trees. Morales immediately looked up, signaling the agents. "Someone's coming, take position." I stepped onto the porch with Aunt Maya, holding Mila close. Lucas's familiar gray SUV came barreling onto the dirt lot, like a ghost from memory crashing into the present. He slammed the brakes, the car tilted. The door burst open, and Lucas jumped out, soaked in sweat, eyes wide like an animal cornered. In his hand was a red gasoline canister, cap already off. Lucas looked at the cabin like it was a corpse he still had a chance to bury. He mumbled as he marched forward. "No one's ruining my life. No one." His steps were fast, frantic, trembling. He didn't see the police vehicles hidden behind the pines, as if fate was letting him make the worst decision of his life. Morales shouted, "Lucas Carter, stop right there!" But Lucas didn't stop. He charged toward the porch, gasoline sloshing with each step like a pyromaniac's oil. In that moment, time stretched like a taut wire. Lucas looked up and saw me standing on the cabin porch with Mila in my arms. His face twisted. In fury, desperation, panic, he screamed, "Everly!" You can't take Mila from me. You can't! But before he could take another step, two agents lunged from behind the cabin. One tackled his legs, the other slammed into his shoulder. The gas can flew into the grass. Lucas was pinned face down on the cold ground, thrashing and shouting curses, but his voice faded into the rustling forest. Let me go, I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to talk to my wife. One agent handcuffed him behind his back, reading him his rights. You are under arrest for attempted destruction of evidence in a federal financial investigation. Lucas stopped screaming the moment he heard federal. It was like someone had stolen the air from his lungs. He turned his head toward me, his voice breaking. Avi! Don't do this! Don't! I didn't respond. I just held Mila tighter, feeling her soft warmth through my coat. And in that instant, watching Lucas pulled up, wrists bound, head bowed like a man who had just fallen out of his own life, I realized something. This was the first time I felt truly free. The sunset spilled over the lake, glinting off the steel handcuffs. Lucas was led down the dirt path toward the dock, where the police car waited. The crunch of pine needles under their feet sounded like the closing of a door I'd clung to for years, and finally let go. I stood still, watching as Lucas was taken away, and I knew my life no longer belonged to him. But freedom doesn't always arrive in a single moment. Sometimes it passes through another door. The family court. 2 weeks after Lucas's arrest at the cabin, I stood in Wayne County Family Court with Mila in my arms, Aunt Maya by my side, Morales seated in the gallery for support. The Detroit morning was cold and dry, the sky as gray as frozen river water. Courtroom 4 was small, with beige walls and harsh neon lights. I sat at the petitioner's bench, composed, but trembling slightly in my palms. Mila slept peacefully against my chest, her breath a whisper. Then Lucas entered, escorted, but not in a prison uniform, just a rumpled shirt and hastily cut hair. He looked around, trying to project panic, as if he were the victim. But when his eyes met mine, all I saw was the void of a man who'd lost control. The court attorney opened the case file, voice neutral and steady. Today we examine temporary custody of Mila Carter, 5 days old at the time the mother left the home. Lucas's attorney went first, playing the script well. Your Honor, my client was deeply concerned when his wife took their newborn away in the middle of the night while mentally unstable post-delivery. He just wants to see his daughter. I didn't need to speak. Aunt Maya placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, Wait! Then the government prosecutor, the one handling Lucas's financial crimes, stood. She held a thick file, tapped it neatly on the table, and looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, aside from family matters, we must present background. Lucas Carter is under federal investigation for embezzling assets from over 100 insurance clients, according to the Federal Financial Bureau. She flipped the first page. Here is the list of victims. The courtroom fell silent, broken only by the soft rustle of paper as she read the names aloud, immigrant clients from whom Lucas collected premiums without ever registering policies. Elderly clients whose payouts he changed. A war veteran who trusted Lucas with his pension. Each name landed like a hammer on Lucas's spine. I heard a sharp breath from the defense table. Lucas bowed his head, clutched his chair, jaw twitching. The prosecutor concluded, Given the severity of the crimes and high flight risk, we recommend Lucas Carter be deemed unfit for unsupervised contact with the infant, unless under third-party court-appointed supervision. The judge, a silver-haired middle-aged woman, looked from me to Lucas, then to sleeping Mila. I consider the child's best interest, she said. I hereby grant temporary custody to the mother, Everly Carter. The father may only visit under direct supervision at the designated Family Monitoring Center session count to be determined upon investigation completion. Lucas's head snapped up, eyes red. No, she's mine. I'm her father. The judge banged her gavel. You are not permitted to speak further. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel hitting the bench was like the punctuation mark ending the most painful chapter of my life. I held Mila close, kissed her on the crown of her head. For the first time, I felt peace. Not the kind you run to. but the kind protected by law. But the journey wasn't over. The moment temporary custody was granted, the family court judge announced the next date: the federal trial of Lucas, a proceeding where his fate would be laid out more clearly than our marriage had ever been. 3 months later, I stood before the federal courthouse in downtown Detroit, a massive gray granite structure looming over Jefferson Avenue. I arrived early with Mila in my arms, Aunt Maya by my side, one hand gripping the file bag, the other steadying my trembling fingers. There were no screams, no tears, just the sharp Detroit wind slicing across the stone steps, as if foreshadowing a final chapter carved in law. The federal courtroom was much larger than family court: high ceilings, stark white lights, rows of microphones like a press conference was about to begin. Below sat journalists, a few victims, and representatives from the Federal Financial Bureau. Lucas was escorted in, his hands uncuffed, but flanked by federal officers. He wore an old suit, his face gaunt, eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. But what choked me was how he scanned the room for Mila, and paused when he saw her asleep in my wrap. A flicker passed through his eyes, regret or despair, but it vanished as the prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the defendant, Lucas Carter, faces 12 federal criminal charges, including insurance fraud, establishing a shell company for asset theft, money laundering through 3 intermediary accounts, unlawful asset transfers to his mistress, and attempted destruction of evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. The clicking of keyboards and rustling papers made the room feel like a steel wire tightening around his neck. Then the prosecutor called, "Witness Serenity Parker." The courtroom stirred. Serenity walked in. Light makeup, hair neatly tied, eyes red from sleepless nights. She bowed to the judge, voice shaky but clear. "I'm ready to cooperate." She told everything: the cabin, the hotel invoices, the transfers, and especially the money Lucas sent her under the guise of investments. When asked about the fake pregnancy, the room fell into stunned silence. Lucas dropped his head, hands clenched. But the moment that sealed everything came when Morales stepped up with the silver USB. "Your Honor," he said, "this device was found in the safe at the Lake St. Clair cabin, along with the property deed and a ledger of illicit commissions. It contains the complete list of victims Lucas Carter defrauded." He plugged it into the courtroom's projector. The screen lit up. Excel sheets appeared, columns detailing transaction times, siphoned amounts, victim names, shell accounts, and destination transfers. The room fell silent, and I saw the moment Lucas broke, not in tears, but in the way his body sagged into the chair, as if the weight of truth had finally crushed him. The judge struck the gavel after final arguments. Given the overwhelming and irrefutable evidence, this court sentences Lucas Carter to 10 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 5. The Lake St. Clair cabin, Lexus RX, and Riverfront Towers apartment will be seized and auctioned to repay victims. I heard the gavel echo again, a firm closing of the door to my past. Lucas looked at me, but I didn't look back. I adjusted the blanket over Mila's head and walked out with Aunt Maya. But the journey out of Lucas's life still had one final step, and it was the heaviest. Returning to Troy to close the door that had sustained every illusion of our marriage, I voluntarily signed the papers to sell the house. Not because the court required it, but because I didn't want Lucas's victims to wait one more day. The federal court would seize his assets, but the Troy house was in both our names. My share could help repay the people who had trusted him all those years. I wanted them to know that if my husband betrayed them, I would not. That afternoon, I drove back to what had once been our home. The moment I stepped inside, a coldness swept over me. Not from the air, but from the memories crammed into every wall. Crooked wedding photos, the blanket I'd knit while pregnant with Mila, the lingering scent of Shalimar on Lucas's clothes when I still tried to believe his excuses. I laid Mila down on the rug in the living room, where she had kicked her legs for the first time at just a week old. She grabbed my finger, eyes wide, as if asking why I looked so sad. I packed only what mattered. Not luxury, but warmth. The birthday card box my mother left behind. The journal Aunt Maya gave me at 16. The old quilt I was wrapped in whenever I had fevers as a child. Everything else, I left. The things Lucas bought to mask the emptiness of our marriage no longer belonged to me. As I locked the door to Troy one last time, the late sunlight slid across the porch roof, casting a thin golden line over my hand like a final period. I placed Mila in the car and drove straight to Lansing, never once checking the rearview mirror. That night, I stood at Aunt Maya's window. Outside, Lansing's streetlights cast a soft yellow glow, the roads quiet enough that I could hear the wind brushing against the rooftop. Mila slept on my chest, her head nestled into my shoulder, her breath light and even, like a whisper of hope. I placed my hand on her back and stared long into that peaceful sky, and I had no idea that this sense of peace would become the foundation for an entirely different life. A life I never dared to dream of, while still living in the house, in Troy. 1 year later, I stood at the door of a tiny apartment near the Detroit Cultural Center, just over 400 square feet, high ceilings, large windows looking out onto lush summer trees, and sunlight spilling in as if inviting me to step into a new chapter. The apartment wasn't luxurious, had no spacious bedroom or fancy kitchen, but every corner belonged to me. No secrets, no strange perfume, no lies tucked beneath pillows, no heavy silences in the middle of the night that I used to normalize. Only morning light, the hum of streetcars along Woodward Avenue, and Mila's soft laughter. Mila was nearly a year old now, chubby, with brown eyes like mine and soft curly hair like her father's, the only part of Lucas I chose to keep. She was learning to crawl on a cheap but clean rug, little arms flailing before burying her face in my knees, as if to check that I was still there, still watching, still loving. I bent down to kiss her head, the warmth spreading through my chest like a silent reminder. I had saved us both, and that was worth more than anything we'd left behind next to Mila. Our dog Tristan lay sprawled on the floor, legs tucked under, ears down, the posture of a dog once afraid of humans. I found him at the Detroit Rescue Shelter 3 months ago. Filthy, ribs showing, eyes wary of everyone. The staff said, "He's been abandoned more than once. No one ever chooses him." I looked at Tristan, then at Mila reaching out toward him, and in that moment I knew. We had all been abandoned in our own ways, so I brought Tristan home, named him after a loyal character in a book my mother used to read to me. Now Tristan never leaves Mila's side. When she laughs, he wags his tail. When I walk through the door after work, he rushes to greet me first, followed clumsily by Mila, our perfect little duet, and me, standing between these two small souls, in this small apartment, bathed in Detroit sunlight. I knew my new life had truly begun. But I didn't expect that this newfound freedom would open up another journey, a journey I once believed I no longer deserved, the journey of rising through my own talents. After I left Lucas, I threw myself into work, trying to regain my rhythm. I returned to the interior design firm in Midtown Detroit, where I'd once been seen as reliable but not ambitious enough. But when I was assigned the Women Rise campaign, a nonprofit project, I worked beyond time, sketching 3D plans while Mila slept, replying to clients between bottle feeds. I wasn't trying to seem strong. I simply wanted to create something that was mine, no longer in any man's shadow. When the campaign launched, it spread across Detroit's social media. Images of women rising from wreckage, of rooms redesigned from the ruins of heartbreak. The local press called it the design of courage. 3 months later, I was called into a meeting where the CEO, a kind-eyed older man, was waiting. "Everly," he said, placing a document on the table. "You deserve more than you've ever been given." I opened the paper. My hand trembled. "Creative director," I laughed, not from joy but disbelief. How did I go from a house full of lies in Troy to this? A position I once thought only belonged to women bolder than me, but the CEO shook his head and looked at me with steady conviction. "You don't have to carry the sins of a bad man," he said softly. "You only need to carry yourself, and that's already beautiful." I had never heard a man say that to me. Not Lucas. Not anyone before. After the meeting, he invited me to a coffee shop beneath Woodward, lit by golden lights and soft jazz. At first, we only talked about work, design, future projects. But then the coffees became evening walks around the Detroit Institute of Arts, conversations about life, wounds, and the fears that shaped us. He always walked half a step behind me, so I'd never feel rushed. Always asked, "How's Mila today?" before, "How are you?" And always looked at me not with pity, but with respect. Months later, when old wounds had healed enough that I could name them without flinching, we started dating. Gently, without announcements or urgency, just two grown people who had emerged from broken marriages, learning to believe in kindness again. And in that moment, when he held my hand under the golden Detroit sky, I realized not everyone who comes after is a replacement. Some simply arrive to remind you, you are worthy of being loved the right way. But what surprised me most was that this new love wasn't the ending of my story. It was the base that helped me see something bigger. Women like me aren't rare. We're everywhere, quietly enduring financial, emotional, and legal wounds that many don't see or can't name. One evening, after Mila had fallen asleep, Aunt Maya sat across from me in the small living room, the table lamp casting light over her silver hair. She said, "You don't realize, do you? So many women are like you, and they don't have their own Maya." That sentence flipped a switch in me, so we began. No fanfare, no big campaign, just a small Zoom livestream and a private online group called Women Who Check Their Statements. I told my story calmly, without sugarcoating or theatrics. Aunt Maya explained every concept in plain language: what a bank statement is, how joint accounts work, how to track transactions automatically, how to store evidence on iCloud without it being deleted days later. Notifications flooded in, not just from Michigan, Ohio, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Colorado. Women I'd never met sent paragraphs-long messages. "Everly, I think my husband's using our joint account to transfer money to someone else. Where do I start? Maya, is there a way to find out if he's hiding credit card debt? How do I save his messages without him deleting them?" I replied to each, slowly, carefully, like I was holding my old self. The woman who once cried in the dark in Troy, hands trembling as she opened bank statements. And one night, after helping a woman in Dallas export 3 years of transaction history, I looked down to see Mila playing with Tristan on the floor. My two babies wrapped in each other's warmth, I realized. I had turned my pain into power, not just for me, but for others. And I knew I was finally building something that truly mattered. What I never expected was that just a few months later, the journey from broken to brave would lead me to a moment I once thought existed only in other people's peaceful dreams, not my own. 3 months after that, on a warm, late spring afternoon, I stood in a small midtown Detroit restaurant under low-hanging golden lights and saw everyone who had become my real family, no large extended clan, no unfamiliar guests, no lavish ceremony, just Aunt Maya, the woman who saved my life from childhood to motherhood, a few close coworkers who knew where I had risen from, Mila in a simple white dress, and Tristan wearing a blue bow tie, sitting perfectly still as if he understood today was important. And the man standing in front of me, my CEO, not a prince, not magic, just a kind man who had learned how to love a woman who once feared everything. When he gently took my hand, his eyes didn't promise wealth or eternity. He simply said, "Let's rebuild everything from truth. That's enough." We exchanged rings. Simple, no flashy diamonds. Nothing to prove, Mila giggled. Tristan gave a soft bark, as if joining in, and Aunt Maya wiped away tears while trying to look stern like a judge officiating a ceremony. The reception ended with a small cake. No tears, no frills, but sweet in the way simple things longed for often are. That night, after everyone had gone, I carried Mila to her crib near the window, then returned to the living room. The streetlights of Detroit spilled shadows across the walls, casting a silhouette of me. small but steady. I stepped to the door of our new home, not the house in Troy I once fled from in fear, not the place with lies waiting behind the door, but my apartment, my life. I raised my hand to the lock slowly, steadily, and locked the door from the inside, by my own hand. Not to hide, not out of fear, but to protect what I had rebuilt from ashes. I stood there for a few seconds, hand resting on the lock, then smiled. A smile I hadn't seen on my own face in years. And inside, a sentence echoed, like the final line of a journey filled with tears, but also strength. He came home from a night with his mistress, and lost everything to lies. I walked out one night, and found myself. And the door behind me, for the first time, truly belonged to freedom. If my story has touched you, if you believe no woman deserves to live in lies or fear, then please like, subscribe, and share this video with a woman you want to empower. Maybe today she's not ready to walk out that old door, but sometimes one story at the right time can change a life's direction. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next healing journey.